Managing a Windows Server infrastructure can be a lot of work, especially when you're supporting client machines. Imagine managing over 100 different Windows 10 and Windows 11 machines. You have to set up network drives, install softwares, apply security policies, and restrict certain applications. Doing this manually can take up a lot of time and effort that can be used to do other things. Thankfully, with group policies, we can automate a lot of these tasks and make our work life much easier. So that's what we will be learning in this video. Alright, so let's dive in. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I will click on my Start menu, and I'm going to search for gpedit.msc, and I'll open this up. But when I do that, it will tell me that I don't have permissions to launch this application, and that is because I'm currently logged into a user by the name of Bruce Clark, and Bruce Clark does not have any kind of admin privileges to be able to use this application. Now, if I try to click on the Start menu, and if I search for GPedit one more time, now what you could do, you could usually right-click on the program and run it as administrator. But in this situation, you'll see that I'm not able to do that either. Now, what I could do is I could launch PowerShell as admin. And once PowerShell is up, I will search for gpedit.msc here. And you'll see that it does launch the local group policy editor for us. And it's currently running as my PRB admin user. So this is one trick that you could do if you need to run applications as admins, but you're not able to do it from the Start menu. You could always launch programs through PowerShell as administrators. Okay, so this is our local group policy editor. And you can see that it's divided into two sections. We have our computer configurations and we have our user configurations. And this tool is used to manage group policy settings on your local computer. So you could do things like create password policies, create account lockout policies. You could change your Windows Update behavior. You could disable certain user interfaces. So for example, you could disable things like control panel or hide things inside of control panel. There's like logon and logout scripts that you could set as well. So it's very helpful when you want to create certain policies on a local computer. So let's say you want to really lock down a specific computer, you could use these settings to achieve that. Now there's another tool that we could use to manage the security policies on the computer, and this is called the local security policy. So I'll click on the Start menu and then I'll search for it. And this time I am able to launch this as an administrator. So when I do that, you will see that it opens up. Now, the local security policy, it's used to manage things like your password policies, account lockout settings, your audit policies, some of your user rights assignments, and some other security options. Now, the local security policy is just a subset of your local group policy editor. So next what I'll do is I'll head over to DC01, and in Server Manager, I'll just click on Tools, and then we'll click on Group Policy Management. Now, Group Policy is a feature in Microsoft Windows that allows you to centrally manage and configure operating system settings, applications, and user environments across many different computers within a domain. Now, how this differs from your local group policy editor is that your local group policy editor can configure settings on only one machine, so only your local machine, and that's it. With group policy, you could do this across all of the machines within your domain. So if you have 100, 1,000 different machines, you can use group policy to manage certain settings. And the settings that we could manage here is pretty similar to what we saw in the local policy editor. We could set things like password policies, like control panel and taskbar restrictions, like user experience, so like set desktops, and we could set the Start menu as well. We could prevent or allow certain software from being installed, and we could configure things like your firewall and your networking as well. Okay, alright, so next we'll expand out our forest, and then I will expand every object under that as well. So we'll expand our domain, and then we'll expand PRB investments.local, and everything under that. And you can see that this structure very similarly resembles Active Directory. We have our PRB investments.local, and we have other OUs under there as well. We have the PRB investments-head office OU, and we have our computer, our groups, and user OU under there as well. Now, one thing that I want you to notice here is we have this policy called the default domain policy, and we have another one called the default domain controllers policy. Now notice that the default domain policy is right under PRB investments.local. And our default domain controllers policy is right under our domain controllers OU. Now, your default domain policy and your default domain controllers policy was created when you first promoted your server to be a domain controller. And these policies apply certain configurations to your domain and your domain controller. So let's edit my default domain policy. I will right click on it and then I will choose Edit. Then under Computer Configuration, I will choose Policies. Then Windows Settings, Security Settings, account policies, and finally password policies. Now, I'll change some of the values for this, and I'll start with the enforce password history option. First thing to know is I cannot go above 24 for the value, so I will reduce this to be 15. And if you're ever not sure about what a setting does, you can always click on the Explain tab, and it will give you the needed information about the settings. You can see that these settings will remember passwords that user have used before. So for example, if my password is Italy 2024 and I need to change my password, I cannot reuse the word Italy in my new password. It has to be completely different. For the minimum password age, I will choose 90, meaning users will have to change the password after 90 days. For minimum password age, I will leave this as is. For the password length, I will change this to be 8, so users' passwords must contain at least 8 characters. For the password must meet complexity requirement properties, I will leave this as enabled, and with that we are done. Next, we'll head over to bclark-pc, and notice the current settings match what's on the default domain policy. And now that we've made the change, we need to reboot this PC for it to take effect. So I'll quickly do a reboot. And once it is back online, we'll launch the local group policy editor one more time, and then navigate to Computer Configuration, Windows Settings, Security Settings, Account Policies, then Password Policies, and success. The changes we made to our default domain policy has taken effect here, and just to be sure, we'll check our local security policies as well. And we can see, yes, the settings do match. So there you go. We've just made a change to our group policy. And from here, you could kind of get an idea of what group policy does and the power that it holds. And if you're thinking, well, we could have just edited the settings right here on the local group policy editor instead of having to do it on the default domain policy. And yes, you could if this was the only computer you were managing. But if you're managing a fleet of computers, if you're in charge of managing and maintaining, securing over 20 different computers, group policy makes your life much easier when you're making changes like these. Alright, so your first GPO change was a success, so congrats. And that's just us editing the default domain policy. Now, I should add a disclaimer here that we should not always edit the default domain policy. We should only be editing this policy for important changes that we want to make. For other changes or for other settings, it's better to create a new GPO. So we've just worked with network shares and we learned how to map a network drive. Doing this for 1 or 2 people is not an issue, but if you're doing this for over 50 users, then that could take a long time. Thankfully, with the power of GPOs, we're able to automate this process. So back in DCO1, I'll right-click on Group Policy Object, and then I'll click on New. For the name, we'll call it iShare-Drive. Then we'll right-click and we will edit this new GPO. We'll go to Preferences, and then Windows Settings, and then Drive Maps. I'll right-click on Drive Maps, and then I'll choose New and Map Drive. And this will bring up the new drive properties. Under Actions, I have 4 options to either create, update, replace, or delete. I will select Create. For the location, this will be our //fs-01/iShare, or whichever drive that you want to share out. We'll check the box for it to be reconnected. And for the label, it will be iShare-Drive. For the drive letter, I will choose X. And that's most of the settings that we'll need. I can also go over to the Common tab, and here we have some additional options. I can choose item level targeting, and then I could click on targeting. I can set filters here to only allow certain computers running a specific version of Windows, if the user domain matches a certain value, and if the computer is within a specific network. Now, I'll exit out of this, and then I will apply my changes, and that's it. We've just created our first GPO. Now, creating and configuring your GPO is the first part of automating your configurations. The second part is selecting who we want to apply our changes to. We can apply our changes to the entire domain, so every user will get these settings, similar to how the default domain policy works, or we can just apply it to just our users OU, which I will do right now. So I will right-click on the user's OU, then I will choose Link an existing GPO, then I will choose my newly created iShare-Drive and click OK. Next, I'll go into Active Directory, Users and Computers, and I will check the user's OU. And here we can see all the users within this OU, and the policy that we just created will be assigned and applied to all of these users. Next, I'll head over to bclark-pc, and we currently have the iShare drive mapped to the S drive, but I will disconnect this. Then I will open up our command prompt and I will just enter net use. And this command will show us if we have any map drives. Now we currently don't have any map drives, but sometimes you could have cache network drives that doesn't show up in File Explorer, but it will show up here. So this is a good place where you could view those drives. And with those confirmations, I will reboot this PC. And once it's back on, I will log in. And then I'll open up File Explorer. And we can see that the iShare drive is now mapped to the X drive automatically without us doing anything. So this just saves us a lot of time. Next, I'll head over to Arbeck PC, and I'll sign in with the Linda Smith's account. And when I go to File Explorer, we can see that we have the iShare drive mapped twice. The S drive was mapped by me manually, and the X drive was mapped by group policy. And another thing to note is that we didn't reboot our Arbeck PC, we just signed in. User policies such as this one will load after you sign into Windows. We could have done the same thing with Bruce Clark's account, but I always like to reboot my PC when applying group policies. I always find that it's the best method to do it. However, there is another way to do it without rebooting. So what I would do is I will disconnect both of these drives. Then we'll open up CMD. And first I'll just run netuse just to ensure that we don't have any cache drives, and we don't. Then once again I'll open up CMD. And I will run the command gpupdate. And what gpupdate will do is reach out to our domain controller to grab the latest group policy. And we can see that our iShare drive is now mapped. And we can see in CMD that the computer and user policy has been completed successfully. Next, I will go back over to DC01. And once again, I will modify my iShare GPO. And back in user configuration, preferences, Windows settings, drive map. One thing I will do is I will modify my action. Instead of create, I will update. Then I will change my drive letter to be S drive. Then I will save my changes. Then back over on Arbeck-PC, I will execute another GP update. And this time, we can see that the iShare drive is mapped to S drive. But now we have two drives with different drive letters. So let's fix this. Back over on DC01, I will create a new map drive. The action will be to delete, and the drive letter will be X. Then back over on Arbeck-PC, I will run another GP update, and I will wait for it to execute. And once it's done, we can now see that the X drive is now gone. So using group policy in your infrastructure can save you a lot of time. It can help you standardize a lot of your processes, and it can help you automate a lot of your tasks. So these were user policies, and the other policies are computer policies. So back over on DC01, I'll open up Active Directory users and computers. And I'll just ensure that both the B Clark PC and the Arbeck PC are inside of the computers OU. And looks like Arbeck isn't, so I will move it over. Next, I'm going to download the Google Chrome Enterprise Browser and the Firefox Enterprise Browser as well. Then in my download folder, I will extract the Google Chrome Enterprise Bundle file. Then inside of the Enterprise Bundle folder, I will go to Installers, and will copy the Google Chrome Standalone Enterprise.msi file. And in my C drive, I will create a new folder called Software. I will paste it here. Then I will share this folder out, and I will just do the basic fat sharing permissions. For the permissions, it will just be read-only permissions, no need to add full control here. And back on B Clark PC, I just want to ensure that I can access this folder, and indeed I can. Then back in my group policy management, I will create a new group policy called Chrome Install. Then we'll edit this policy. Under Computer Configurations, we'll go to Policies, then Software Settings, then Software Installation. We'll right-click on Software Installation and click on New Package. Then we'll find the location of our Google Chrome Enterprise file. Now, here is a very critical step. When performing software installation through group policy, we need to ensure that the client machine can access the MSI file. And here's what I mean. If I just go to the regular path, so this PC, C drive, then software, and select the MSI file here, right away we get a pop-up box saying that it cannot verify the path as the path is not a network path. Because C/software, it's not a network path, it's a local path. Think about it. If you go to the same location on your personal computer, it will take you to your C drive on your personal computer, not the one on DC01. And we can see on the source, the path is C:\software followed by the MSI package. And this is why we share the folder out. So I will delete this entry and I will re-add the package. But this time in the search box, I will search for //DC-01/software. Then we will select the MSI file and open it. And this time we don't get a pop-up notification. For the software deploy option, I will select assign and then OK. And with this, our GPO is configured. So now we need to link it to an OU. Since this is a policy that applies to computer objects, we need to assign it to our computer's OU. So I will right-click on our computer's OU. Then I will select link an existing GPO, select our Chrome install GPO and click OK. I'll click on the Chrome install GPO to view the settings. We can see our computer's OU is linked to our GPO, and under security filter, we can see authenticated users. Authenticated users applies your group policy to everyone within your scope, but this applies to user objects only. Since we're applying these settings to computers, we need to select a computer group that we can use. So we'll remove the authenticated users security group. And we get another pop-up box saying that removing the authenticated user security group can cause your group policies to not apply, and to ensure that your group policy has at least domain computers or authenticated users with at least read-only permissions. For this situation, we'll add the domain computer security group, and this group will allow us to apply our group policies to all computers within our scope. I'll go over to the delegation tab and I'll click on advanced. I'll select the domain computers group, and we can see it has read permissions and it has apply group policy permissions. The apply group policy checkbox is very important. If this is not checked, these policies will not apply. And we'll check the permissions for the iShare-drive as well. And we can see that the authenticated users is here and they have read permissions and the apply group policy permissions as well. So what we need to do for computer policies to take effect is to reboot the computer. So we'll head back over to bclark PC and we will reboot it. When it comes back online, we'll sign back in, and we can see we now have Google Chrome on our desktop. So let's go over to Arbeck PC, and while we're signed in as Linda Smith, we'll run a GP update. We get that the computer and user policy update has been completed successfully, but we don't see the Google Chrome icon on the desktop. What we can do is force the policy to apply. So we'll type GP update /force, and we get a message that's basically telling us that some policies can only be applied after you reboot. And it's going to ask us if we do want to reboot, which I will say yes. And once the reboot is done, we'll sign back in, and success. Google Chrome is now on our desktop. Now, when we created this group policy, we have a folder on DC01 that contained the MSI file. So it's that software folder that we created on the C drive of DC01. This worked, but it's not the best practice. You should never host your files on your domain controller. Always keep your MSI files for your group policies somewhere else. Back on DC01, I will create a new GPO, and I will call it Firefox install. For the location of the MSI file, we'll store it on FS01. So I will navigate to //FS01, and we can see that I can access the netshare-fs1 folder while logged in to DC01. Now, because I'm logged in as an admin, I'm able to access this, but if I were to go over to Bruce Clark PC, and if I try to access the same folder, Bruce Clark does not have the permissions needed to access this folder. So if we were to store the MSI file here in the netshare-fs1 folder, the install will fail because Bruce Clark does not have the permissions needed to access this folder. However, Bruce Clark does have access to the iShare namespace and the folders within that. So let's use this. Back on FS01, I will sign in. I will go to File Explorer, and then in the FS-Drive 2, I will go into the netshare-fs1 folder, and I will create a new folder here. We will name the folder software, and then we'll go to the folder permissions. Remember that I don't need to share this folder out because it inherited the share and attributes from the netshare-fs1 folder. And then we'll go to the security tab, and here I will add the everyone security group, and I will just leave the default permissions. I won't change anything, and I will save my changes, then exit. Then I will launch DFS management, and I will add the target folder for the software folder. Then we'll head back over to bclark PC and ensure that I can indeed access this folder, which I can. Then back over on DC01, I will copy the Firefox MSI file to the software folder on FS01. Then we'll edit our Firefox install GPO. We'll go to Computer Configurations, Policies, Software Settings, then we'll right-click on the Software Installation folder and select New Package. We'll navigate to //fs-01 iShare Software and select our firefox.msi file. And for deploy software, we'll just leave it as assigned. And we'll link our GPO to our computer's OU. Then we'll go over to bclark-PC and we will reboot this PC. We'll sign back in once it comes back online, and there you go. Firefox has now been deployed to our desktop. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, didn't we miss a step? We didn't add the computer security group. How did it get deployed? Because the authenticated users security group that gets assigned by default also includes computer objects. So when you're deploying GPOs, if you leave the authenticated users in the security filtering, then the GPO will be assigned to everyone. That includes users and computers. Okay, but what if we want to assign a GPO to just a group of users, or maybe just one user? Let's say, for example, that we want to restrict Linda Smith from using the control panel, but we want this restriction to only apply to Linda Smith and no one else. We could create a new OU and move Linda Smith's account over to that OU, but that's very unsustainable because you will have to do this for every user that needs a specific GPO assigned to them. The best method to do this is to use security groups. So back in DC01, we'll go to Active Directory, and in the groups OU, I will create a new security group called restrict-control panel. Then back in Group Policy Management, we'll create a new group policy, and we'll name it Restrict Control Panel. Then we'll edit the GPO. We'll navigate to User Configuration, Policies, Administrative Templates, and then Control Panel. We'll select the option to prohibit access to Control Panel and PC settings. It's currently set to not configured, so we will enable it. Then we'll hit Apply and OK. Next, in Active Directory Users and Computers, we'll add the Linda Smith user account to the Restrict Control Panel security group. And we'll link the policy to the PRB Investments Head Office OU. That means that this policy will be filtered down to the users, computers, and group OU as well. But only users that's part of the security filtering will be applied. So currently the security filtering is set to authenticated users, which means that if we just leave this as it is, this policy will get assigned to all user accounts, which is not what we want. We just want this policy to get applied to Linda Smith's account. So I will add the Restrict Control Panel security group. Then we'll go over to the Delegation tab and we'll click on Advanced, and we'll uncheck the permission for Apply Group Policy for the authenticated users permission. And what this will do is apply this group policy to only users that's a part of the Restrict Control Panel security group. And if you look at the permissions, we do see that it does indeed have the Apply Group Policy permission checked. Next, on RBEC PC, I'll open up the command prompt and we'll type GP update. We see that the user and computer policy was successfully applied. But if I try to open Control Panel, it still works, which means it didn't exactly work. I will tell you now that our GPU configuration is correct, and the reason why it's not working has to do with how Active Directory security groups work. In command prompt, I will type the command whoami/groups, and this command will list all of the security groups that Linda Smith is a part of. Notice that we don't see the restrict control panel security group, and that is because when you assign a user to a security group, you need to reboot it for it to take effect. GP update does not force a sync between user and their security groups, so keep that in mind. So I will reboot, and once it's back online, I will sign in, and once I'm in, I will open up command prompt, and once again we'll run the command who am I /groups, and now we do see the restrict control panel security group is now showing up. And if we were to try to open up control panel, it's denied, so our group policy worked. Next, I'll head over to bclark-pc and we'll run another command. So the command is gp result /h, and then we'll add a c:\temp\bp policy.html. The gp result command gives us an overview of the policy that's currently assigned to us, and the c:\temp\bc policy.html is where we can find the result. So I'll navigate to this location, and I will open up the HTML file, and here we can see all the policies that are applied to Bruce Clark, and even the policies that are denied, and the reason why it's denied. So this was just a brief introduction to group policy and what we can do with it. Group policy is very powerful, and if you have an Active Directory domain, you can standardize your user setups and automate a lot of your processes. Group policy can also be very tricky to work with sometimes because it can get very complex, because you're working with security groups, you're working with scopes, you're working with different OUs, and you're working with security filters as well. But here are some things to know when you're applying group policies, and here are some best practices to follow. First, you want to use a tiered GPO design, so follow a structure such as local, site, domain, and an OU. Avoid setting policies at the domain level unless it's really necessary. Apply your group policies at an OU level, keep the GPOs targeted, apply them to organizational units instead of sites or domains to reduce unexpected inheritance. Also use security filtering, so combine GPOs with security groups to ensure that only the right users and computers receive that policy. And also test your GPOs before deploying them in production. So if you have like a sandbox in your infrastructure that you could use for these kind of tasks, if not, you can create a test OU in your Active Directory and then move test users and test computers over to that OU before deploying it to production. And also use stage deployments. So if you have a very large GPO that you need to deploy to your organization, try to roll it out in small groups first, and then try to roll out by departments. Sometimes when I do these GPOs, I tend to roll it out within my team first, and once it's successful there, I do it to maybe 2 or 3 other departments, and once those users have no issues, then I roll it out to the entire company. And lastly, make sure to clean up your old GPOs. So try to audit your GPOs, delete and archive them if they're no longer in use. The more GPOs that you have in production, the more resources your client machines will be using to process those GPOs. Alright, so that's it for the video. Please leave a comment below if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything that you learned here, and I will try my best to get back to you. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.